The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
What do you get when you throw a smirking late-night provocateur into the same room as a governor who seems to navigate public office like it's an endless loop in a Target parking lot? You get Greg Gutfeld going full savage on Tim Walz, like a smug demolition derby with punchlines instead of bumpers. Picture Gutfeld slicing through Minnesota's missteps like a hot knife through tofu at a barbecue cookout. From policy flops to bureaucratic blunders worthy of interpretive dance, this takedown turns governance into gag reel gold. And trust us, the roast sizzles harder than Tim's latest polling numbers chill. Buckle up, this is political comedy served rare and relentlessly.
Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank in service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Tim Walz, if political leadership were a buffet, he'd be that limp, lukewarm scoop of mashed potatoes nobody asked for, yet somehow ends up sad and smushed next to your sirloin. Bland, confusing, unavoidable. Then in struts Greg Gutfeld, armed with sarcasm sharp enough to carve through concrete, and he's not here to play nice. Picture a stand-up comedian with the edge of a chainsaw let loose in a fireworks warehouse. Gutfeld shreds through Walz's leadership with the manic precision of a sleep-deprived Dexter doing slam poetry. It's not just policy, it's performance art, if finger painting with expired mayonnaise counted as a masterpiece.
Exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. This is a guy who pushes a hoax about sex on a couch. And then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy...
Let's be real, watching Tim Walz govern Minnesota feels like watching a substitute teacher walk into a classroom packed with caffeinated raccoons and no lesson plan. Chaos meets confusion with a hint of forced authority. He speaks like a man who skimmed leadership for dummies once at an airport bookstore and decided, yep, this'll do, and the follow-through. Impeccable if the mission was to transform the land of 10,000 lakes into the land of 10,000 facepalms. It's leadership theater, minus the script, and with plenty of unintentional slapstick.
Recently, Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Greg Gutfeld didn't even have to break a sweat. Roasting Tim Walz is like dunking on a guy who shows up to a job interview in Crocs, blindfolded, and still thinks he nailed it. Walz might as well have walked into a debate armed with a kazoo and a vision board labeled feelings. He practically gift-wrapped the roast, slapped on a bow that said extra crispy, and whispered, "Go hard." At this point, it's not satire, it's full-contact sarcasm. And Walz, He brought glitter glue, a paper crown, and a participation trophy to what's clearly a rhetorical cage match. Let's kick things off with the economy, shall we? Tim Walz took one look at rising inflation, surging unemployment, and a mass business exodus and thought, you know what this needs? More taxes. Not just income taxes. No, we're talking the full fantasy package. Tax the air, tax the laughter, maybe even toss in a thinking of moving to South Dakota surcharge. Under his watch, businesses aren't just leaving, they're sprinting out of Minnesota like it's a haunted mansion built entirely from COVID mandates and DEI PowerPoint slides. And then comes Greg Gutfeld, wielding sarcasm like a scalpel in a blackout comedy club. He dives into Walz's economic policies with the hunger of a raccoon raiding a compost heap. How, he asks, do you make California look like a capitalist wonderland by comparison? Because in Walz's Minnesota, the only things experiencing real growth are government red tape and the collective headache pounding through the middle class. Now let's talk crime. Walz's public safety strategy is about as sound as giving a toddler a box of matches and crossing your fingers. His answer to surging crime: blame society, hold hands, and hope the criminals are touched by community theater and lavender essential oils. It's less leadership, more scented candles and a 5-alarm blaze.
Bad cocaine, but Kamala can't speak, he can't speak, Biden was so high he couldn't remember anything. Like, this is literally the dumbest administration of all time. Why is he talking?
It really is the ultimate clown show. And I said this in the pod. He's a clown without a circus.
He doesn't even need makeup.
He's roaming the terrain. Is there some carnival that I could work for? I'll wash your windows.
He's a rogue clown.
Yes.
Who is just an inconsequential footnote to vice presidential history.
Yes.
No one will remember his name on trivia night, and that's going to be in 3 months.
Meanwhile, Gutfeld's over here turning statistics into stand-up gold. He practically unrolled a map of Minnesota and scrawled, "Here be carjackings," across the Twin Cities in bold red letters. His takedown of Walz's crime policy: brutal. He compared it to a mall cop trying to stop a riot armed only with a kazoo, a clipboard, and a deeply misplaced sense of optimism. If Tim Walz were in charge of national security, Gutfeld joked, we'd all be learning Russian by Thursday and brushing up on our Mandarin by Monday. And education, buckle up for that glittering dumpster fire. Walz, yes, a former teacher, because of course he is, decided that Minnesota classrooms should be less about curriculum and more about creative feelings. Forget math and science. Kids are now getting graded on their ability to spot microaggressions and construct emotionally safe spaces using popsicle sticks, glitter glue, and a vague sense of anxiety. Gutfeld didn't just go sarcastic, he went thermonuclear. He claimed the only standardized test students are passing is the How to Be Perpetually Offended exam. Under Walz, school has morphed into a stage for performance art where grades don't matter, discipline is taboo, and detention's been replaced with a TikTok therapy session and a participation trophy signed in crayon. And can we please talk about the COVID policies? Oh, buckle up, because Tim Walz treated the pandemic like it was his big break on America's next top authoritarian. He shut down everything in sight: bars, gyms, churches, basically anywhere joy or community might accidentally happen. But protests, those were deemed spiritually essential, apparently because the virus checks political affiliation before infecting. Who knew? Greg Gutfeld couldn't resist the buffet of contradictions. He called out the absurdity with surgical precision. Grandma's bingo night was shut down by force, but as long as your protest featured a Marxist slogan and a papier-mâché puppet the size of a Prius, you were good to go. And then there's the budget surplus. Minnesota found itself swimming in cash, so much so that even Tim Walz had to acknowledge it. But instead of, say, returning it to the people who actually earned it, Walz treated the surplus like he'd won a state-sponsored game of Monopoly. Cue the expansion of government programs, a hiring frenzy of diversity consultants, and maybe even plans for a taxpayer-funded mural of himself, gazing off into the distance like he's pondering the deep meaning of bureaucratic excess.
Walz lost, but one of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eye. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every...
Gutfeld nearly needed a paper bag to breathe into from all the irony. He quipped, "Letting Walz manage a surplus is like handing a toddler a platinum credit card and telling him to only buy the essentials. Because sure, Tim, I'm certain the Department of Overregulation urgently needed that top-of-the-line espresso machine and a taxpayer-funded gender equity mindfulness retreat at a lakeside spa." And speaking of bureaucratic bloat, Walz has managed to turn red tape into Minnesota's newest extreme sport. Want to open a lemonade stand? Hope you've got 14 permits, a full background check, and an official pronoun registration form signed in triplicate. It's like Soviet-era paperwork, but with more hashtags and a much worse ROI. Gutfeld painted it perfectly. Walz isn't just expanding government. He's trying to win Olympic gold in bureaucratic gymnastics. Every decision seems to involve more flips, spins, and twisted logic than a Cirque du Soleil tribute to IRS audits. And then there's his oddly persistent political man-crush on Gavin Newsom. It's like Walz wakes up every morning asking, what would Gavin do? Then tries to turn Minneapolis into San Francisco's colder, clumsier cousin, minus the charm, but with twice the parking restrictions.
Tim Walz vomits more nonsense.
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Maybe it's a dolt like Donald Trump, you bully the out of him back. This is a weak, cruel man that takes it out and punches down on people.
Wow. Oh. Jamie.
What a
Painful,
douchebag,
huh?
Greg. That was absolutely painful. He was the keynote speaker at this conference. Can you imagine having to watch more of that?
He watches Gavin Newsom light California on fire like a 3-wick scented candle made entirely of failed policies and thinks, genius. But what if I add frostbite and remove half the job opportunities? It's as if Walz got his hands on the West Coast political playbook, then decided to perform the entire thing in snow boots, sub-zero wind chill, and a higher property tax bracket. Gutfeld didn't pull any punches. He said, if Gavin Newsom is a walking shampoo commercial with the ego of a Bond villain, then Tim Walz is the understudy who missed half the script, wandered on stage late, and started ad-libbing in pig Latin. Walz walks around like the political love child of Bernie Sanders and a broken traffic light, blinking left, signaling right, and going absolutely nowhere, while claiming to be the champion of progress. And transportation. Please, this is the same guy who pitched a multi-million-dollar bullet train that might be finished around the time dinosaurs evolve back into birds and file zoning permits. Meanwhile, Minnesota roads look like a Mad Max racetrack where potholes outnumber speed limits. Residents just want their cars to survive the winter without losing an axle. But instead, Walz is out here selling magical trains like he's auditioning for Hogwarts, while real infrastructure crumbles like overbaked gluten-free toast.
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Yeah. Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath, you don't want to see.
Greg Gutfeld rolled his eyes so hard, seismologists probably picked up the aftershock. The sarcasm, dense enough to require its own ZIP code. "Oh, brilliant move, Tim," he quipped. "Let's toss common sense in the recycling bin and drop billions on Elon Musk fanfiction. But with trains. Because nothing screams fiscal responsibility like building a bullet train to nowhere. One that moves slower than a DMV line and serves less purpose than a solar-powered flashlight in a Minnesota January. Then there are Walz's media appearances, equal parts theater and tech failure. Picture a man dressed like leadership for Halloween, delivering speeches with the clarity of a dial-up modem submerged in a fish tank. He speaks in long, meandering loops like a GPS forever stuck on recalculating, while somewhere behind the scenes, his advisors frantically toss flashcards and light flares, just hoping he accidentally completes a coherent sentence. Gutfeld didn't just critique, it was performance art. He shredded Walz's delivery like a sleep-deprived slam poet fueled by Red Bull and regret. Watching Tim explain policy is like witnessing a raccoon try Morse code wearing oven mitts. Confusing, chaotic, and disturbingly confident. It's not leadership, it's verbal gymnastics nobody asked to watch. But now we're all stuck judging the floor routine.
Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
When the pressure's on, Tim Walz doesn't just pivot. He pirouettes like a caffeinated ballerina fresh off a TEDx retreat and a double shot of oat milk espresso. Ask him about surging crime, and suddenly you're knee-deep in a heartfelt monologue about how adding more bike lanes will somehow reduce armed robbery. Mention an economy swirling the drain, and out comes a passionate lecture on gender-neutral parking lots and the emotional strain of asphalt microaggressions. This isn't governance, it's interpretive policy theater. Every real-world problem is met with a PowerPoint presentation on community healing, complete with stock photos of ukulele circles and vaguely worded grants for empathy infrastructure. Gutfeld skewered it to perfection. Walz is essentially a magic 8-ball in orthopedic shoes. Shake him up and the answer is always some jargon-laced, soul-soothing nonsense about intersectional gardening or equity-based zoning rituals. And let's not ignore the branding. Walz struts around with that aw shucks farm dad persona, but his idea of roughing it is sipping lukewarm almond milk, sans compostable straw. He's the guy at a football tailgate who brings kombucha, asks if the brisket is ethically sourced, and offers tofu sliders as a fun twist. Gutfeld roasted him with surgical precision. Folksy, please, this guy is about as relatable to the average Minnesotan as tofu at a monster truck rally. Because nothing screams working-class hero like quoting Noam Chomsky while wearing a Patagonia fleece and worrying about carbon emissions from the grill.
And he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it. I want to see this in slow motion. You'll see Walz extends his hand to his wife. She grabs it, they shake, he pulls her close, and then goes in for that non-friction hug, all the while still shaking her hand. I wish there was a word to describe that. Oh yeah, weird. I've seen warmer embraces between Chris Christie and a salad.
Meanwhile, Minnesota's rural communities are practically shouting into the void with the same desperation as someone trying to cancel dial-up internet. In 2025, these folks were hoping for a leader who actually gets their world. Tractors, real jobs, small-town grit, maybe the occasional church potluck where nobody uses the word sustainable. Instead, they got Tim Walz, a man who seems to believe Greater Minnesota begins at the last bike lane in Minneapolis and ends wherever the kombucha taps run dry. This isn't leadership. It's lifestyle branding with a side of virtue signaling. Walz governs like he's live streaming a TDD talk titled Empathy Through Bureaucracy. How to feel things in 5 committees or less. He doesn't just craft policy, he mood boards it, filters it through hashtags, and packages it in oat milk-soaked slogans that sound deep until you realize they mean absolutely nothing. Greg Gutfeld's final blow? He christened Walz the IKEA governor, arrives in a box, missing half the screws, instructions in Swedish, and by the time you're done assembling it, you're crying, drinking flat LaCroix, and wondering if you accidentally built a metaphor for your state government. And he wasn't wrong. Walz is the kind of guy who thinks a policy plan is just a Pinterest board with bullet points. His version of governing includes interpretive dance budget forecasts and equity-themed charcuterie boards. Gutfeld didn't just poke fun. He dismantled the whole carefully curated image with the precision of a caffeinated hawk and the timing of a comedy sniper. Every bloated initiative, every sanctimonious soundbite, every word salad wrapped in bureaucratic tofu. Gutfeld slow-roasted it until the only thing left was the soggy remains of an oatmeal-flavored brand. And the tragic twist? Walz probably walked away thinking it was a TED Talk tribute. Because nothing says visionary leadership like a man in khakis, clutching expired IKEA instructions, still wondering why the cabinet won't stand.